Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Professor and the Carpenter. I'm Noah Kachivik. With me, as always, is Carlos Garrido. Tonight, we have a very special guest that I'm super excited to talk to about all of the constant drama on the left, especially this most recent thing with Cornel West and Jimmy Dore, the great Niko House. We're going to get to it right after this.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much for coming on, brother. That international always gets me going. But before we get to the key topics of the night, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to do the sort of work that you do now?
So it's a long story, kind of, but basically, I ended up getting tagged to be the founder of Carolina Students for Bernie Sanders at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. One thing led to another, and I ended up being the state director while I was still a senior in college. That shit was crazy. End up discovering election fraud within the Democratic Party because I was also running the volunteers as well.
Wait, Niko, let me interrupt. Are you saying the Democratic Party wasn't running legitimate elections?
No. I know. Now, funny enough, people were surprised by this. And to some degree, I could understand because they were like, well, no, this would have to be some kind of operation that was already well underway that started long before Bernie Sanders. And I'm like, yeah, that's my point. Yeah, that's how it is. I don't know. I actually worked for a gubernatorial candidate, Kenneth Spalding. He was actually the gentleman who told Johnny Cochran to say if the glove don't fit, he must have quit. He was one of the attorneys for O.J. Simpson, funny enough. But he had to actually delay the commencement of his campaign because while they were in the planning stages, they had plans and they found them, right? So like, I'm like seeing it from all sides. And now this wasn't actually the idea that they were cheating within elections was just not new to me. But what was, I guess, bizarre for me was how many people were genuinely surprised by it. And I was even attacked by people for literally just pointing stuff out that was easily verifiable because I had like primary sources, not only that, but my own experiences, comments, pictures, photos, text exchanges, whatever. But people were asking me like, well, what should we do? How will this go? What is the plan? And I would go on Facebook Live and people just ask me to talk about stuff. And eventually, I think I had missed one day or two because I was literally on spring break when all of this started. And everybody was like freaking out, like, hey, what are we supposed to do? All this news came out and I need you to talk about it and explain to me why I should care. So I was like, all right, whatever. I'll just do Facebook Live. And then eventually I ended up getting a radio show on iHeartRadio. I called it Mikasa Sukasa because obviously my last name is House. And I try to break down politics in a way that is easily understood in a form that you can kind of discuss at the dinner table and everybody can still comprehend what's going on. And it evolved from there. And since then, it's just been a one-way train to the most irritating career that I love with all my heart. It's
I feel you there.
Yeah, same here, man. I get involved in politics right around the same time, and I had the the pleasure of having most of what was considered political practice be like in person stuff. And if maybe people were more normal back then, I don't know what happened, but as soon as we start getting online and specifically Twitter, you start to see some of these interactions in the left and how people, relate to one another. And you're like, what the hell is this?
2016 changed everything. People were normal. You're not like mistaken. I was on Twitter way before. I deleted my old account because I did used to be a rapper and I probably did some crazy stuff. But in 2015, I could definitely see the tide turn. I said, I'm just gonna go ahead and delete that motherfucker and start a new one. But even then, people who disagree with each other, like if say me, because I was never registered as a Democrat, and I made that very clear. That was actually the original appeal of Bernie that made me campaign for him. And whenever I would have a disagreement with Democrats, it never got vitriolic. It was like, oh, well, I feel this way and you feel this way and it's fine. That was it. And then 2016, now, like we have to remember too, that they're like paid actors in bot farms from the Democratic Party. In fact, David Brock and those people, the Media Matters folks actually like held a meeting, did this memo where they were explaining exactly how they planned on using bot farms in order to muddy the waters of conversation, attack people, et cetera, et cetera. So that is planned. And then, unfortunately, the reality is the algorithms reward you being in a camp. And when you get to that, and now we're talking about affecting people's bottom line, because obviously we need to benefit from the algorithm. And so in order to become one of those quote unquote algorithm gatekeepers, you have to pander. And so technology is not really helping the situation. Yeah, it's allowed us to make connections like this, but no, it's not. This isn't normal. Like I was in politics. Like that was before I ever started talking in front of a camera. I was talking to crowds. It was never like this. This is new, and I believe that it was done on purpose so that we don't have conversations. Because I'm sure you all very, very, very well acquainted with the work of Fred Hampton. Like you get people to work together. The people will become unstoppable. The working class outnumbers the elite millions to one.
Yeah, and I think we often don't, like, a lot of us can know this on sort of an abstract level. Like, yeah, there's troll farms, yeah, there's bots, but when they're engaged in some sort of media consumption, commenting, Twitter thread or whatever it is, that all that knowledge goes out the window, right?
Yeah.
And we never think about how we get sort of lured down this corner where we're just, you see the things on Twitter and it's like, what happened to your adulthood? Basically, it's like, grown ass people acting less mature than my 13-year-old, who is not a very mature 13-year-old. Let me tell you.
You know what I always say? I say now, like people think I'm joking. Some people, I guess, refer to it as a matrix, but now I officially fucking hate that term because Andrew Tate has ruined it for me. Like I haven't even watched The Matrix since Andrew, and I love The Matrix, bro. I love that movie. It is dope. But like he ruined it because people, while he said he's talking about the Matrix, people don't realize he's a part of the Matrix. He is one of the controls, quote unquote, of the Matrix. I refer to it as the algorithm, and it's I know, like I do a lot of shrooms, so let me go ahead and prepare everybody for that. I do a lot of shrooms. Generally, I try to do shrooms at least once a month, and it's at least an eighth, probably going to be a quarter. And when you start to what shrooms does the first time is to give you this huge perspective, right? And everybody knows, like, if you've done it, like that first time, you're like, what the fuck? Everything I thought I knew, not only about the world, but even about myself, is not exactly what I thought it was. But then you do it again, and actually you get a perspective of another perspective. And then you do it again, and you would think, like, at some point, this shit's going to stop. I've been doing shrooms since 2021. Every single time, you learn something new. But what I also realized was it actually became harder for me to communicate with some people about certain topics. It's easier now, but because what I started realizing is I immediately know, you're speaking to a specific group, and I don't even think you realize you're doing it. Like I'm not that group, or this person speaking to a specific group, or I'm reading stuff and I'm like, this perspective is flawed. How the hell do you not see this? And then I realized, like, oh shit, I'm no longer part of the algorithm. I've fallen out of the algorithm. And what's even crazier is when you do fall out of the algorithm, You'll find out because everyone else will treat you as such.
You know, it reminds me. That's exactly how learning Marxism is for me. Like, you read a little Marx and you get that knowledge. Nothing is what you thought it was. You read a little more, and it's the same exact thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
and
go ahead, Carlos.
that comment you made on Tate, it's so interesting because in many ways, like an essential component of like the Matrix today is having people who position themselves as if they're outside of the Matrix, right? And this is just another allegory for like its original version is like the allegory of the cave, Plato's allegory of the cave. There's a lot of people who think that they've escaped the cave, but they're still deeply in there. And I would say that some of the deepest ones in there are the ones that think that they're out already. But what you're talking about there with, with just the way that social media forces us to relate to one another. We do through the Institute, this Marxism school. I just finished teaching our Marxism and the History of Philosophy class yesterday. And we dealt with a contemporary philosopher, Hans-Georg Moeller and Paul D'Ambrosio, who are teaching in China. And they've developed the notion that the way we construct our identities today is through prophilicity. Like our identities are the profiles that we end up curating. But every single form of identity, whether it's like the old school sincerity, where you have to adapt to the specific social roles you're thrown into, or the more bourgeois authenticity, where you have to develop yourself, you still see that stuff in movies. Every single one has to be socially validated somehow. And the old ones were validated by present peers, like direct people that validated who you were. Yeah. Today, it's validated
in titles, basically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Today, it's validated by these general peers. And the way that occurs is through these things that the first president of Facebook, Sean Parker, calls social validation feedback loops. You post something, if the people react to it favorably, you're more likely to post something like that. The thing is that who controls these fields of communication? Who are they in bed with? And you look something like TikTok, the most popular app right now in the country. I think it's one of the most popular ones on the planet, frankly. It's got, at least in the U.S. management teams, it's got people from the State Department controlling what gets seen, what gets censored.
The algorithm in the U.S. is literally completely and totally different than China.
Mm-hmm.
And it's totally different than Brazil. It is unique, and that is obviously by design, which is why I find it hilarious when people are like, you want China controlling your TikTok algorithm? I'm like, motherfucker, China controlling shit in the U.S. That's the U.S. controlling that algorithm.
When the Chinese company was primarily controlling it, we were just blowing up. We had videos on a weekly basis getting millions of views. And as soon as the special military operations start, and it coincides with the transfer of control to the American company, we got 7 of our accounts banned, and hundreds of thousands of followers in those accounts. But what ends up happening is that when they have that control, not just over these sites, that gives them control to censor people if they get too big and dangerous, like they've done to a lot of our friends, the folks at Mid-Press News, the Institute's TikTok, and a few other folks right now with.
I got banned off of TikTok once, and they let me come back, and I got banned off of Instagram. But none of them let me monetize anymore.
But you have the capacity to control how it is that people think through controlling the general peer, right? The reactions that are given to the shit that people post. So bots, they might be bots, but you get enough bots to like something, share something, eventually real people start seeing it. And that's why, that
is literally how Vouch became a thing, and people don't know that. That's like Vouch was nobody, literally nobody, bro. And then maybe 7 months before the general election, maybe 8 or 9 months, he went from being no one to hundreds of thousands of followers on YouTube and millions of followers on Twitch, and everything he said on Twitter would all of a sudden became relevant. And I'm like, who the fuck is because my thing is, you at least generally, because you know how the algorithms work, right? You have to fall into a camp. The thing was, Vouch did this weird shit where he never really felt he was pretending to be socialist, pretending to be communist, but he was clearly a neoliberal, but really he was a racist neoconservative. And He was blowing up. Like you know how, like, because you know about the algorithm gatekeep. Do you know how hard it is for you to blow up that big and not be on TYT's dick? In fact, TYT hated Vouch. It made zero. I understand how Destiny became who Destiny is. He's really a neocon, but he pretends to be a liberal. But like, he sells the liberal take in a way that Democrats and neoliberals love, and he's pretty consistent in that. That isn't Vouch. Vouch is an idiot, and he went from nobody to, because you know what? If the bot, because of the way the algorithms work, if the bot said that you're relevant, then you are relevant. And that's why I call it the algorithm, because the algorithm has made it so that now in reality, people have to address Vouch whenever it's time to. You cannot ignore him now, because now, even though 50% of them people are bots that are boosting him, but there's still the other 50% that are now questioning whether or not they agree or disagree with him, and you have to deal with that. And that's why I call it the algorithm, because once again, you'll just know. Like I literally tweeted the other day. I was like, sometimes it's crazy to like what people would do to be part of the algorithm, but like I always know that I'm against the algorithm, because you'll know you're against the algorithm when people that you agree with, people that you consider friends, actually. There are a lot of people who agree with you from a distance, actually, but they're afraid to publicly agree with you or to publicly associate you with you, even more so like they'll associate with somebody they disagree with more than associating with you, because they know that everyone else in the algorithm can see, and they know that you're out of it. Like, hey man, I like you, but you're out of the algorithm. Like, that's not good.
It tarnishes their profiles from the perspective of that general peer that they get the social validation from through likes and follows and all of that. And if you look at how it works
in emails I get saying exactly that, like, you're absolutely right on this. I wish I could say something, and we'll do it. I
want to let you know, man. Always makes me, bro. I get that from politicians. I've gotten it from other YouTubers. I've gotten it from journalists, from mainstream journalists, Democrats, public. I'm not going to say any names, but I can say Kyle Kalinske actually had told me, this was a while ago, right? We were at Politicon. This is when me and Kyle were friends, when he actually had his fucking head on straight. He told me,
Backstreet Boys Kyle.
Right? He was like, "Oh yeah, man. Of course, I've always known who you were." I was like, "What?" Like, before that, Kyle had barely said anything to me. We had become friends at Politicon, but all of that little neo-progressive independent journalism wing basically pretended to ignore me, even though they knew I was part of the DNC fraud lawsuit. They knew that I had a decently popular channel, especially at that point. I was growing really rapidly. I was a VIP at Politicon that year. That's how I got there. And Kyle was like, "Oh yeah, everybody knows who you are." I was like, "What? Why don't they?" He's like, "Bro," he's like, "Well, because you're right most of the time. Like, you're right most of the time. You're honest. You're consistent, and you are a problem." Not because of who I attack, but what you stand for, and you're always going to stand for that. And it's easier for you to, I can be friends with this person that I may sometimes agree with, but I also know that they're faking it and they're full of shit just like I am. So I know I'm not worried about them calling me out.
It's strange, because it makes me think, who better for the people that run these bot forums that blow these sorts of people up to have regular working people see as a voice of socialism or communism or the left than someone like Vouch, right? Exactly. Not even Kyle Kalinske, who back in the day, I mean, he was very bourgeois, we would say, but he at least was like speaking his mind and speaking from the heart back then. Not like now, but
you can tell because even if I disagree with him back then, he at least had some type of logical consistency. Right. He didn't have to traffic in hyperbole and these emotions, and he just would say what he said. Like, that's part of what's called secular. So you're supposed to say what you say, and it is what it is. Now he has this shit where the Republicans are way better than the Democrats. Like, why do y'all do that? Like, what the fuck? Like, don't explain it. Don't tell me they're way better. Break down the policies and explain it to me. Because if they're way better or way worse, I'll know based on the policies. And you don't have anything to pitch to me, so therefore you have to use hyperbole instead.
There's that great Turncoat Don video where it's the old Kyle debunking the new one, and you start to see his face getting beat up. But it's scary how how these manipulations are so successful at changing the minds of people. It takes propaganda to a deeper level than ever before because people consider these identities, these political positions, to be part of who they are. It's their profile.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's so incredibly
Not just
effective.
culture, religion. It's literally their religion now.
Yeah. It's a form of civil religion. Yeah. And it's used for imperialism all the fucking time. Like against Bolivia, there was 68,000 bots that made the shit trend so that real people saw the fake things that they were promoting, and it allowed the legitimation of this coup attempt against successful coup.
Lying about Evo Morales.
The same thing that they did the same thing with Cuba, and we got to be dumb to think that they're not doing it in different forms in the discourse that we have with each other online. Like we've had stuff that we post that gets retweeted by accounts that got maybe a consistency of 10 to 15 likes, and because their quote tweet is like hating on us or calling us fascists or something, you see it get boosted to like 3, 4, 500 likes.
Yeah, you see the impressions shoot up. You're like, what the fuck is this random person with 30 followers, and how do they have 50,000 impressions?
Right.
That is not how that works. I mean, I used to work in marketing. I know how analytics work. I'm like, bro, there's no way unless somebody with a major page retweets it. But obviously, the major pages that it belongs to, they're not going to retweet it because then it will point back to them.
Mm-hmm.
So like, where does it come from? Oh, it's a bot farm. And they became really popular on Twitch. Twitch had to like cut down a lot. And some people would say that, oh, Vaush got banned because of something that he said. What I think was actually, there's a couple of people that happened to. And I actually believe what was happening was Twitch was getting pissed off at the bot farms. And they hit, oh, they're just trying to silence my free speech. I'm like, bro, Vaush has said some shit on Twitch. I mean, some shit. And they never banned him. And then it's like, he gets, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think Vaush is permanently banned now. And I know that he actually hasn't said anything worse than some of the stuff that I've heard like Destiny or others say, but I know that Destiny's growth for the most part was organic. It was like he just rode a wave because he was a gamer first. He rode that wave, and that's how, and that's like how a lot of those guys, like a lot of weird neocon liberal weird like mixture. Like I mean, lazy white people with nothing to do, like they love people like Vaush and fucking Destiny because they're lazy white guys with nothing to do. Like they have a lot of relatability there. They pontificate from their chairs, never actually engaging anybody directly, never going into the streets to see how people feel. And I don't know if y'all know this, but Destiny is a gusano. I don't know if y'all know that. Yeah, you don't know that. But I'm like, oh, that explains. When I found that out, I was like, well, fuck, that explains everything. I didn't know anything else. But
wait, he's Cuban American?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I'm like, well, fuck, that's all y'all had to tell me. But Destiny's growth was organic. But I believe that what happened with Vaush is Twitch they were trying to clamp down the bot farms. It wouldn't be hard to figure out that he has a bunch of bot farms. And he got pushed out and banned permanently. And that's what happened. Twitter isn't as vigilant about that. Excuse me. Yeah, Twitter definitely isn't as vigilant about it. In fact, I would say that the bots have actually gotten worse since Elon has taken over.
Even though he said he was going to deal with that problem.
Yeah, but he said like there's like some secret coding that he can't even get access to that directly deals with that, which wouldn't be surprised about. Like don't get me wrong. Like I do believe that there are legitimately illegitimate attacks on Elon for strictly cultural purposes. But no one ever talks about the fact that for instance, the Starlink story. Everybody's like, why are they attacking Elon? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, they shouldn't be attacking him because if he legitimately did prevent World War III, thank you. But also, why the fuck is Starlink able to be used to coordinate military strikes? And why do you have all these Pentagon contracts, but you're the one telling us that you're like, people believe this motherfucker's a hero, bro? Like, no, you're not the hero. He's not. Like, I don't care once again, but you can't say that because you have to pick a side. Otherwise, you don't get the benefit of the algorithm. You got to pick a team. And when I say stuff like that about people are like, what the fuck? Huh? I didn't know that about Elon. I'm like, what's wild to me is y'all follow all these people who cover all these globalist elites. And y'all know everything there is to know about all of these globalist elites. But like Elon is so powerful and he literally controls the algorithm at this point in such a way that even Alex Jones is careful about how he talks about Elon Musk. Do you know how fucking powerful you have to be for Alex Jones to be like, look, man, I know exactly what Elon is. I'm not trying to get shut down forever. Like that would be the straw that broke the camel's back. You know why? Because Elon had all. Remember, he went back and he invited all these people to I want to say it was Twitter when he bought it at the time. People talked to him, all these like basically a bunch of conservatives who kiss his ass all day. He brought the ones that he liked back, right, to Twitter. The ones that were banned, he brought back. And then just by coincidence, the first people who were rewarded monetarily by Twitter were the people who were kissing Elon's ass.
Oh, imagine that.
But you got to have the crafts and teens because you got to have an opposition. You have to have an oppositional force for your algorithm to gain strength. If they have nobody to attack, the algorithm doesn't work. You're not as easily manipulated. Like the crafts team brothers have to be there in order for the Ian Chongs and the fucking like all those people to thrive. It gives them something to talk about. It gives them somebody to go at. Same thing like with the Democrats and Republicans. If you just admitted that we had a uniparty, well, then who am I going to fight with? It would just be us versus everybody else, wouldn't it? No, that can't work. So Elon Musk is dangerous. Like you got a South African billionaire who kind of actually like by their definition, illegally immigrated, somehow ended up in the States, got all the privilege of being a citizen, and they're perfectly fine with that. But if he was black, it would be a problem.
Yeah.
And I talk to them, they're like, no, he's actually African American. Like, motherfucker, no. Yeah, like, I guess
if there was a vowel at the end of that name, there would be a big old problem.
Exactly. And it's
calling Elon African American is hilarious.
Yeah, because but that lets you know that. But I like to call him African American because I'm like, he is. And look at how you treat him versus how you treat Africans that are actually African American. Like it's like when you're talking about Israel. People always say it's in the time like, well, if y'all care about Jewish people so much, why the fuck don't you talk about the fact that Israel is out here castrating black Jewish people? Like literally sterilizing Ethiopian Jews, treating them like shit. Is it about Jewish people, like anti-Semitism, or are you protecting Zionism? Because Zionism is not inclusive, and people don't seem to understand that. But like, I used to date an Israeli girl, and I'm telling you, obviously, our biggest fights were always about Israel, Palestine. Yeah, seriously. And now, don't get me wrong, I was very patient with her because that's like, I try to understand from a perspective like, yo, you're surrounded by the closest people that your family, your friends, your mentors, anyone that you've ever loved or respected. They have this worldview, and by you having the opposite view, now one, you're basically finding out that damn, everybody that I've ever confided in is full of shit and indoctrinated, and they're wrong. But now that becomes a reflection of yourself. You're like, fuck, how did I fall for that? What else am I falling for? And it's hard for people to reconcile that with their own ego. But over time, I just would start every time the conversation would get brought up, and I'm around her Israeli friends, and I would just ask them questions. I'm like, I'm not even arguing with you. I was like, they were like, yeah, man, I don't know why people want to get rid of the Second Amendment in the States. It's super important. I said, yeah, man, like, because y'all basically have a version of the Second Amendment in Israel, right? And they're like, yeah. I was like, yeah. And they're like, I was like, oh, man, so it's crazy that you brought that up. Do they have the same Second Amendment rights in the settlements? Because y'all say that they're treated equally to you. And they're like, well, no. I'm like, why not? Well, because what if one of them get a gun and go and shoot people up? I said, well, we have that same problem here. Like, I don't, but you just said it's important that we all have the, well, it's different. I said, why is it different? Because we have terrorists that could be. I'm like, well, I said, when you're going into their settlements, they're not coming after you. You're going into random settlements and hunting them down. And surprised when they have weapons to defend themselves when they know, and you're going into their settlements and hunting them down. I'm like, yeah, I would have a gun too, and yeah, I would probably fire back at you. Like I don't. But over time, when you started to ask those type of questions, people started to be like, oh shit, hold up. So I was patient with her as she kind of started reaching the conclusion on her own. But at the end of the day, what was the point I was making? I was making a point. It was important before that.
You were talking about the binaries. The binary.
Just the binary nature of how people operate. You have to be in one camp or the other. You have to be in the Elon camp, or you're a neoliberal. You have to be I'm sure y'all deal with this all the time with because personally, so I'm not a quote unquote Marxist or communist. I'm like just one of those people like we just do what the fuck is common sense and work for your society. I have a lot of communist ideals, And I definitely don't put up with communist slander because like I'm like y'all are fucking like ridiculous. Communism is not responsible for billions of deaths. That's capitalism. It is quite literally capitalism. But what they refer to as what I call the caricature of communism is actually everything the U.S. government actually is. Mm-hmm. But they say, "Oh, look at them becoming more and more communist." I'm like, or being the capitalist they've always been. Like, you can't fucking change the definition of words now. Like, before, whenever you was getting money and you thought shit was sweet, it was capitalism. But now, because the mask is coming off, it's communism. No, don't function like that, bro. You can't do that. I hate when people do that. But that just goes back to me, I guess, I'm not binary when it comes to the way I think about things. And so, like, are there elements like of like the free market? People don't really get like in if you really think about it in a lot of ways, if the market truly was a free market, then the world would actually end up leaning more communist, right? Like genuinely communist, if it really was a free market.
Well, that's part of what the BRICS,
in
the struggle against sanctions and these sort of arbitrary.
How many communists, legitimate, like North Korea? Everybody wants to talk shit. Look at what happened in North Korea because of the dictatorship. Like, nigga, excuse me, my bad. They were the largest growing economy in the world, literally. And then they were like, nah, fuck that. We got to choke them out economically, and then we're going to pretend it's communism's fault. And that is disingenuous, is dishonest. And I always challenge people who say that, what we're seeing, this is crony capitalism. I always say, okay, well, give me a different fucking example of capitalism. When was it not called? Like literally the late 1800s was referred to as the Gilded Ages because monopolies just was robbing the shit out of y'all. Like, when was it not crony capitalism? It's always been that.
The way I look at it.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. The way I look at it, and I've worked with a lot of people who tell me they're libertarians and shit. I threw my pen. Sorry.
He needs his pen. It's an essential part of his persona. He does
deal for me. So I've worked with a lot of libertarians that are like, "Oh, the free market's the way to go," and every single time when we put away the labels that just get manipulated, what substance is underneath, every single one of them agrees with communism in substance.
It's true.
But if you're a working class person, how do you not get on board with it should be us running this thing rather than the elites? It's just common sense.
Go back to that Fred Hampton quote, socialism is the people. If you're afraid of socialism, you're afraid of yourself.
They labeled the Black Panther Party terrorists specifically because they showed that, one, you could have black solidarity, two, while having working class, like just class solidarity, and three, we don't need the government for a motherfucking thing. We can feed ourselves, we can clothe ourselves, we can educate ourselves, we can organize ourselves. We have our own public transportation, we have our own babysitters. We don't have to go to a daycare. Literally, we have our own gun safety classes. We don't need them for shit. And obviously, it was ran by black people on top of that. So now you got a whole different, like, oh, hell no, this is too much. Terrorist organization. And the KKK, if I'm not mistaken, still isn't labeled a domestic terrorism organization. The only reason the KKK has thrived to the degree that it has is because of the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They can't exist without the federal government. The Black Panther show, in spite of the federal government doing everything in its power to shut us down, we're still thriving.
Yeah, that's like the KKK and other similar fascistic organizations of the same kind. They were especially used by the government to like break up strikes and any efforts at cross-racial solidarity, especially in the South. And it was fundamental in bringing about this fascistic period of terror that gets inaugurated after 1876 with the counter-revolution of property that occurs in some of the southern states that had came out in a way victorious, because some of the states were led by the Freedmen's Bureau, and the federal government was there enforcing that the interests of poor black people and poor white people would be upheld. And
they used to use the KKK to disrupt elections, and people think that, oh, they were just attacking the black people. No, they were disrupting elections for everybody. Mm-hmm. They wanted, whoever the state wanted in power, the federal government wanted power, the KKK worked to make sure it got in power. And they were obviously, the KKK was told it's because we're here for you, but like then the KKK went and rained down hell on not only black people, but the poor white working class would have benefited from a candidate who was actually going to do something for them. So yeah.
Yeah, Du Bois, who we call the father of American Marxism, calls this the first dictatorship of labor, right? Or like what we in Marxism call dictatorship of the proletariat. And everybody, talks a lot about the Paris Commune and whatever, which is great. But we had that shit first here in America, and it lasted way longer than the Paris Commune before the counter-revolution. And I just want to touch on the Panthers real quick, because it's wild. J. Edgar Hoover, in charge of the FBI, was saying that Fred Hampton in particular was the most dangerous man in America.
At 21 years old.
He could unite the communist movement, which was mostly white, the Black Liberation Movement, and the peace movement. Man, if we got those three together right now, we'd be just as unstoppable as Fred Hampton talked about.
Oh, more unstoppable.
To go back to what we've been talking about this whole time, all of these algorithms and all these people getting sucked into them, we end up just bickering and backbiting each other, making up crazy lies about each other for no reason other than to watch a number of hearts on a screen go up. That's
or protect the bottom line, right? And that's
right.
Some people believe that if you are getting a lot of views, that means, and you are right more often or whatever, you're taking views from me. That's another thing that, like, when I first started, I could say with 100% certainty, doing what I do, I was the most qualified, but I was also I was the youngest. It was me and Kyle. We were the youngest. But there's just the added factor of me being black, right? So now, because everybody know, I didn't know at the time, but everybody knew that eventually TYT and their ilk and those who live by TYT's algorithm were going to vote Democrat. They were going to push it with the Democratic Party. Once again, being outside of the algorithm like I am, I'm like, I'm not fucking voting for Hillary. Why would y'all do that? And now I'm a black person who's built up credibility, has the qualifications, telling everybody else, I don't know what the hell those white people are talking about, but Hillary is horrible for black people. Now I'm a problem because I have an obvious added credibility of experience. And so it becomes silence. Like, that's why people in RBN talks about this a lot. And I appreciate they always give me credit and all that good stuff. But the reality is I couldn't believe how there just were no black men. No, and especially at the time, no black women. There were basically until Bree became a thing. And Bree, is a Harvard educated former attorney. So I don't even put that in the same category, right? But before Sabby, black women would come, they would see the vitriol, see how they were being treated, being ignored. And then it was like, it's not worth the energy and the time. And I always say, you can tell how healthy your movement is by how many black women are involved. It's that, and that's, I know people are like, what? Doesn't make any sense. I'm like, because black women are the most ostracized for various reasons. And that's not an American thing. That is quite literally around the world. And even though obviously Brazil, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but Brazil has more Africans here and people of African descent than every other country except for Nigeria. And even here, it's a thing. Black women are ostracized. And we had no black women, basically. One black guy, and even I was being ostracized by the leftists who were trying to basically convince people that they could talk more about my issues than I could. Right? So it's a very interesting phenomenon. But I want to say too, this thing with identity, right? Identity is a very interesting topic because I firmly believe that we have a right and an obligation to ourselves to have a strong identity, right? And we get into these conversations about bi, trans, black, white, et cetera, et cetera. My thing is, I'm a unique situation because I'm part of the Caribbean diaspora, and then I'm also part of the very unique situation, which is I'm Bayesian. So Bayesian is actually assimilated to the point where it doesn't even seem like we exist in the U.S. because it was mostly those from from Bangladesh who moved to Barbados. But the reason why they didn't move to the rest of the West Indies is because the whole beef between Muslims and Indians, Muslims and Hindus. And so when they came to the States, the ones who could afford to come to the States, they had to still use their connections and network to survive and thrive. But if people figured out you were Bayesian, that means you were one of the others. You get what I'm saying? So people didn't realize how many people were actually Barbadian or Bayesian specifically. Like, bro, like almost all the famous black celebrities from the 90s and the early 2000s were like LL Cool J, Megan Good, DJ Grandmaster Flash, Will Smith, obviously Rihanna, ASAP Rocky, Cuba Gooding Jr., his brother. I mean, bro, there's like a huge list of people that are specifically Bayesian. And we have a very unique quality to us because you can almost be molded. We can be molded because we don't have the cultural identity that the rest of the Caribbean has, the rest of the West Indies specifically have. And what I mean by why I bring that up is because for me, I have crafted my identity, and I've had the benefit to be able to craft my identity in a way that I chose. And because of that, it also drives what I fight for, what I believe in, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't chosen for me by a family attachment, by a nationality attachment. It was none of that. And that gave me a very unique perspective, especially now that I've gotten older, and I see an attempt by society on both sides to either completely strip you of your identity or make you religiously attached to an identity that someone else created for you. Because people, for example,
repackaged brand named identities, right?
Exactly.
That you then fulfill.
I am not, so I'm not a Christian religiously speaking, but I believe in being a Christian as far as being Christ-like, if you will, like the literal definition of Christianity. And the reason why I don't believe in religion because it's man-made, and I'm like, if you want to get into the logic of it, I'm like, literally all the three major Abrahamic religions specifically say don't idolize anything man-made, and all those books and the religions were man-made. So I'm just following the literal rules of the books that y'all say we should read. So if we want to get the logic of it, but there's a reason for it, right? Of course, people that are religious conveniently skip shit like that, but I take basically everything literally. So I started trying to figure out why wouldn't they want that? But then you start to realize because man will mold you into the identity that best benefits them for whatever way that is. But if you are spiritual and you are consistent in your morals and your ethics, then you can see when you're being manipulated and you will not be blinded by that identity. You get what I'm saying? So let's just say capitalists, for example. Capitalism is a religion. I don't give a fuck what nobody says. There's no way you can see everything on paper, look at it, have a history of it, study it, and then be like, man, this fucking communism is crazy. We got to get rid of it. You know what I'm saying? It's like whenever Christians, they'll look at all these people who claim to be Christians running the country, like they'll listen to Mitch McConnell strip every possible benefit he can away from poor and working class people and say, but man, that's a good Christian though. That's a good Christian. I'm like, bro, are we reading the same fucking book? Because what they're relating to is the identity of Christianity, which is fabricated. If you were actually Christian, and you would know Jesus had a huge problem with religion in general anyway. You would also probably know that we're living in like, I don't want to say the end time, but we are living in a very transitional period. And there was a reason that the Bible was able to predict quote unquote revelations. Now it got co-opted in the word, all of a sudden revelation, even though it's supposed to have a positive connotation, you've kind of been trained to perceive it as being negative. But if you actually strip away the fantasy of it all, what it is specifically referring to are the necessary characteristics of a failed society that leads to people waking up and demanding a transition of power in culture and status quo. Because it's, for example, it talks about the sea life being dead. It actually specifically says, I think it's like 36%. Like the number in the Bible, literally, bro, you know, we're almost exactly at 36% of the sea life being extinct right now. It talks about your food being poisoned. It talks about the smog in the sky covering the sun. It talks about the water even being poisoned. So you know what that tells me? I know people are like, well, yeah, that's like the plague. I'm like, no, that's not what it is. What it is these are, if my crops are growing and I'm a farmer, but your fish are poisoned, I'm good. Why am I worried about you? Or vice versa. But if my fish are fucked up, your crops ain't growing, the smog is killing everything. Like now, all of a sudden, I can't ignore your problem because the source of your problem is the source of my problem.
That's called class consciousness, brother.
Exactly. And so the Bible was able to predict this, in my opinion, because they weren't predicting shit. They were like, what are the circumstances that causes society to wake up simultaneously and challenge the authority of that era? Let's paint it at like, yeah, let's make everyone so scared to have this happen so that all they do is follow authority in hopes that they never actually have to overthrow that authority. The Bible makes revelations like a bad thing, but if you're ever going to evolve in society and progress, revelations actually have to happen.
Well, Christianity was originally an extremely revolutionary movement of sorts, very anti-empire up until the 3rd century with Constantinople. But you brought up a lot of really good points, one of which was the topic of race, which was one of the centerpiece topics for the Jimmy Dore, Cornel West discussion. And we commented on this. We were somewhat dissatisfied with both takes that they had and the way in which it just proliferated, right? These binaries proliferate online and groups of people line up for one side or from the other. And, from the Marxist tradition, this idea that you have on one side, like an identity struggle, and then on the other side, like a class struggle, is nonsensical, because when you fight for the emancipation of 4 million enchained working class people in the South of the U.S. in 1865 and the 1860s, it's not a class struggle, but fighting against your boss in a factory is. When you fight for the destruction of the de jure second-class citizenship that a big portion of Black Americans existed in the U.S., and you succeed in 1964, is that not a successful class struggle? But this other stuff is. So the Marxist tradition has always seen, whether it's Engels with the struggle of women against patriarchy, Marx with national struggles, Lenin with national struggles, in the U.S., Du Bois with the struggle against racism. All of these are the forms that class struggle takes in various ways. So you see both Cornell and Jimmy talking about, no, it's not this, it's this, or it's either this or this, both. And the reality is that when you're struggling against racism, you're fighting that which Marx called the poison that divides workers. That is a class struggle. That is fundamentally a class struggle. It's not this other type of struggle. It's a form of the class struggle. So we were dissatisfied with that part of the conversation, but there weren't many people commenting on this that tried to escape the binary, either Dore was fully right or West was fully right, except for us. And I looked at your commentary and you were going beyond that by bringing both of them onto your show. And while people are in a way profiting in terms of discourse off of, talking about the burnt bridge, it seemed like you were trying to recreate those bridges that shouldn't have been burnt in the first place. So can you tell us a little bit about that, how you reacted to that interview, and, how perhaps your thoughts have changed on that topic? Because we also have the fascism one that I think is important after interviewing both Dore and West.
So it's funny that you brought that up, because I probably out of all the major content creators, I didn't make any money, and I knew that going in. I'm not monetized on YouTube. And the one place that I actually would have profited, I went out of my way to not post it there, because I even though most of those people do watch my YouTube page and they watch Jimmy and everything, but I wanted to be at a place that people could find those interviews singularly, point to a single location, have a single link, and I didn't really care about profiting off of it, because I consider Dr. West a friend and acquaintance. I definitely consider Jimmy a friend, and I definitely consider both of them allies, necessarily so, to the movement because of their unique influence and advocacy. Now, I was just as frustrated, right, with both of them. And I talked to Jimmy separately offline before that interview, and I also talked to Dr. West offline before our interview. And obviously, I expressed some of my frustrations during both of those interviews. But so my issue with Jimmy was, and Garland probably put it the best. He's like, Jimmy is a revolutionary who thought he was interviewing another revolutionary, but he was actually interviewing a reformer, right? And I'm like, well, actually, that's a very good way to put it. They were speaking past each other. Jimmy did not, in my opinion, handle it the best, because that's just how Jimmy is and the way he talked, the way he communicated. And I explained to Jimmy, I'm like, look, it's not really fair, but I'm going to tell you, as an educated Black man, I didn't go to a quote unquote Ivy League, but I went to what we would call a public Ivy League, because that's what UNC is considered. I'm like, if you open up a conversation with, I'm going to educate you and coach you on something, bro, I have I am aware enough and have been around people enough, because I speak working class. Like Garland Nixon actually put it good. He says, Jimmy tends to speak working class white guy, and Dr. West speaks Harvardese. That's what everybody around him speaks. They literally did not understand each other. And at one point, it almost became like where Dr. West became somewhat cognizant of the fact that he's like, I did not have any idea how important these issues were to working class people. I don't understand anything this guy is saying. It was frustrating him because he thought he was more connected to the working class than maybe he and plugged into the working class than maybe he originally thought. And I believe that frustrated him. Now, as far as the class thing and the race thing, and we talked about it with Jimmy. I understood the point Jimmy was making strictly from a strategic perspective, but Jimmy worded it wrong, could have worded it better. And then because of it getting very adversarial, Jimmy just leaned in more to his point about class. You can't talk about ID politics. So he was doing logical leaps that made him come off as apathetic to racial struggle. You get what I'm saying? To prove that he's right and Dr. West is wrong, you should listen to him. Now, on the other side of that fence, my issue with the way Dr. West handled it, and the way, because my thing is Dr. West, I'm like, yo, if he's misunderstanding you and he has such a major audience and Jimmy's pretty smart, you might need to fix your message if you're running for president. That you just have to take a step back. It's not about you anymore. It's about saving the country and bringing a movement together. So there's something off about your message, and you have to figure out what it is that will make him and a good chunk of his audience react like that. And it can't simply be because Jimmy's white and racist. That's not going to cut it, because too many people also know that to not be true. So I know what it was. It wasn't specifically calling out white supremacy. It wasn't specifically talking about multicultural, multi-ethnic. That wasn't it. What it was is all you could talk to Jimmy about, and all like what it apparently looked like anyway, the perception of the interview is you let everyone know what you're against. That's it. I know you're against white supremacy. You don't have to convince me of that. But that doesn't tell me what you're fighting for, because Kamala tells me she's against white supremacy too. So does Joe Biden, allegedly, right? I have conservatives that'll come on and pretend they hate racism, but that's not what they're really saying. You get what I'm saying? Like when you only fight against something, you're much more easily manipulated, because the only thing that someone has to say to become your ally is, "Oh, I fight against that too," but you don't have any idea what they actually fight for.
Right?
You become a tool. You can't sit there. Like I said, I took issue with the fact that you call Tucker Carlson a white supremacist without acknowledging any of the pot. Because like as a journalist, I'm objective. I'm going to acknowledge when you do something right. I'm definitely going to call your ass out when you do something wrong. And I've done both with Tucker. But he was like, Tucker Carlson, white supremacist, fuck him. He didn't say that specifically. Never does anything right, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, but then you go on CNN and, hey, brother Anderson, brother Cooper, you're doing such a great job, but you work that. And I'm like, so how am I supposed to? I'm confused now, Doctor. What? Because you told me I'm supposed to dislike Tucker Carlson because of his coverage of protests, for example, that basically, trafficking at least some white supremacy. But I remember distinctively when Anderson Cooper was trafficking in the same propaganda that was claiming that the protests from 2020 were being pushed by Russian propagandists. So that's brother Cooper, and that's white supremacist Tucker. If I'm going to learn from you, because this, like, I'm just speaking from a voter, how do I square that circle, bro? Like, I would get confused. I would get frustrated, and when voters get frustrated, they just say, "Fuck it, I'm not going to vote for you."
Right.
Right. Like, that's what it was. And I explained this to Jimmy, and I explained this to Dr. West. I said, y'all's misunderstanding is that Jimmy, to some degree, also. Less of a degree. I think that Jimmy knows a little bit more of what he's fighting for. But when he preaches, sometimes when he gets into his Jimmy rants, he mostly knows how to focus on what he's against, and he wants to know other people are against it too. And if you're not against it, it's a problem. And Dr. West He wants to know lets people know what he's against, and he wants to know that you're against it too. And like, I'm like, bro, but you got to talk about what you're fighting for, because we all agree, because I've heard y'all have conversations separately with other people, with me. It is classism, but classism is a car. It is literally a car, right? But racism is the engine. Sexism is the alternator. Like, bro, it don't matter if you got a motherfucking BMW fresh off the lot. That alternator broken, your ass ain't going nowhere. It don't matter how pretty your classism is. It doesn't matter. But we got solidarity from basically everywhere else. Yeah. But is the engine working? Well, nah. But like the tires are fly as hell though, right? At least I got the car. So tell me you're making payments on a car that ain't fucking going nowhere, bro. You have to fix every part of that car. You know why? Because they use racism to create these fissures in class. They use sexism to create these fissures in class. You can't tell me, oh, we have to talk about classism and ignore the racism. Why? Y'all got manipulated specifically when they use race to convince y'all like that we were enemies, you dumbasses.
And that's
until you understand how you are manipulated into racism, till you understand how you are manipulated into ingratiating yourself with the patriarchy, till you understand how you are manipulated into buying into this idea of quote unquote capitalism, how can you possibly understand how to fight the war that you are claiming you want to fight? You don't even understand your enemy.
And that's part of the paradox. Just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's part of the paradox that you get with this either-or treatment, that by saying we're just going to focus on class, you're working with an extremely limited understanding of class, and you're not really focusing on class if you're not fighting also against what is dividing the class. And I think part of it's an interview, and these are both human beings, emotions are up, and all of these things have to be taken into consideration. A lot of us are just watching it, with cool heads, and that's not how it is for them.
But into consideration how much of a toll emotionally is taken on both of them.
And
no one's acknowledging that. And people are taking advantage of it. That's what's also pissing me off. Clicks and money.
Let me just say, I think your analysis, especially on Twitter, was fantastic about this whole thing. You got two people that should not divide. And it's a really good example of exactly what we were talking about at the very beginning of the show tonight, right? That these algorithms set people against each other, and we already got that in our head and our assumptions going into that conversation, right? And then just aside from them, it blew way out of proportion. You had thousands of people taking it way farther than either of them did, who took it pretty far. You know what I mean? And
which then influences them too.
Exactly.
Influences them. The feedback loop. It's because of the feedback loop,
right?
Right?
But from my angle, and here's what I was thinking. I didn't get to talk to Carlos and Eddie about it when they were watching it. I had a thing with my family, but to me, it seemed like right out the gate, Jimmy fucked up. He was talking about coaching him, and it just set the tone all wrong. And like you said, he speaks working class, right? He's not going to alter his language or nothing like that. And you know what? That's what he's demanding Dr. West do. So he should hold himself to that same standard. Know who you're talking to. Know it's about the cause and getting something accomplished, not your ego and thinking you should be able to say whatever you want.
But also, as I said,
I think Dr. West, though, has a
Dr. West wanted for president, though.
Activist break.
Yeah. That's the point you made with I forget what I saw both
Jimmy,
of you.
I said, Jimmy, I expect you to go on fucking computer, go online, react emotionally, and do what the fuck you do.
Right.
I mean, because he knows, I do that. But I'm like, you can do that. You're a fucking journalist. Like, you're a jagoff comedian. You make it very explicitly clear the kind of person you are. You're not running for president. Dr. West is.
Right.
That's the difference.
That's a good point. Now, I think Dr. West, though, has what we call activist brain. He's been in these Ivy League universities and around all of these professional activists for decades. That's his scene. That's what creates all of his assumptions. He talks like them. He walks like them. He thinks like them. Because
they adore him for it.
you know? And
Poverty
we're
is
at a point now
important.
where the working class is waking up, but they're not activists. And we got to talk to them differently than we talk to activists.
Yep. And
that's all there
it
really
comes
is
down
to
to
it. And Jimmy said that in a real crappy way. That's all.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I mean, exactly, because the reality is that it's weird. They were both speaking English and they were both using English words, but they were not speaking the same language at all.
Right.
And it was crazy because they almost, both of them were getting frustrated because they're like, bro, they were even questioning whether or not they were speaking the same language because they weren't. But like Garland said, Garland was like, he was able to understand what both of them were trying to say to each other and where they were misunderstanding each other because he grew up in poverty and became successful. And I'm like, oh, well, because I was the same way. I grew up in extreme poverty and I became successful and I went to a public Ivy League school and ran those circles. So I'm like, oh, is that why I'm not? I didn't take it. But I also have, of course, the added benefit of perspective. Like when Jimmy goes into interviews, and it's not a Jimmy thing. This is just a human thing rather than more than anything. Jimmy doesn't care about your perspective. He's going to ask the questions from his perspective and the perspective that he believes should be discussed. And he's expecting your answer to be right. And obviously with Dr. West, he's coming on to talk about what he believes is the most important perspective based on the people that he's around. And we can go on, there's separate reasons for that. But that was guiding his, but neither of them were considering each other's perspectives, not outside of what they could potentially do for each other. Mm-hmm. Because that's the way that the normal world works. Unfortunately, one realization I had to have when I this is another shroom trip, guys, in case you were ever like, I really believe that most problems can be solved by literally 1% of the world's population having an international shroom day, bro. You would be surprised at the mountain.
I feel the same way with getting blasted, getting drunk.
Bro, literally, I had to learn that like you're not the center of the universe, even though you because people really have an overinflated ego, and it's not in the way that people think like, oh, I'm full of myself. No. Everyone feels like everyone is making decisions so take me for example. I could feel like everyone in my life is making decisions about their lives because of something that has to do with me. It is our natural instinct. It's just natural. It's you know what it is? It's the same psychological concept. I can't remember. I think it's Freud. He talks about how the baby you cover their eyes and they're like, oh shit, this person completely disappeared. But then you're like, peekaboo, like, oh shit, you were here the whole time. It's just like that, but it's more complex because we have so many societal factors that we have to consider. But the natural instinct of a human is to believe that the universe quite literally revolves around them, even when it doesn't. And so, with that particular situation, I was able to take a step back and be like, they're clearly misunderstanding each other. I don't understand how they're not realizing that they're misunderstanding each other. And then what happens is there's separate sides that convince them that reaffirm this belief that the universe revolves around them.
And that they're incompatible. Because when you look at the substance of what they're saying, what is Jimmy arguing for? He's arguing for what Chris Smalls did. What did Du Bois, the most important theorist in American history, say was the biggest vehicle in overcoming some of the worst forms of racism at his time? The CIO. The CIO, which was a communist-led union, doing what Chris Smalls is doing today. So in substance, they're arguing for fighting the same battle, and it ends up becoming this clash between terms when the concept of what it is that they're arguing for is the same thing.
Literally, I'm like, you're just literally talking about fighting the same battle on two different fronts. That's like, and we can argue this, and there is a conversation to be had about the strategy of that. But we need to understand, they should understand specifically in everybody getting involved is like, but that is the only discussion that should be being had is strategically, what is the best way to achieve those goals? Not whether or not Cornel West is a fucking infiltrator because he is not, or Jimmy Dore's a rape. I'm like, that's what we're doing. Like, that's and it's, bro, I can't tell you how frustrating it is because I know that they were friends before this. Cornel West has been on Jimmy's show way before this, and I also knew that like Cornel West had also been dealing with like literally KKK shit in Mississippi prior to that interview, right?
Mm.
The things that he had been seeing, that it is emotionally, like being a black man, unfortunately, for a lot of people who may not know this, it is emotionally taxing. And some people are like, well, it's like, well, as long as you're not experiencing racism or like, bro, when you're black, the world, like, but when I get up and go check the mail, that is when I start being a black man. Like, it is, somebody's gonna walk across the street, somebody's gonna double take at me to make sure I'm not following them. It is somebody moving over in the elevator. It's someone trying to be friends with me to look cool, to pretend like they have a black friend. It is it's a non-stop. It is emotionally draining, bro. It is other black people expecting me to act or behave a certain way around certain people. Like, it's non-stop, and it becomes emotionally taxing. And that's how whenever Jimmy said the coaching thing, and I was like, oh shit, that's not.
I don't think he meant it with a
He
racial
didn't mean it like that.
but it comes out that way. Objectively, you watch it and it's like,
fuck. Like, I know you didn't mean it like that. And when he was like, oh, you're getting bad advice, I'm like, I know that he's literally thinking, yeah, you're running for president, you have advisors. But I'm like,
and he explained that on another video. Right, he was like, I was trying to be nice and be like, these bad ideas, or these ideas he thinks are bad, can't be coming from you. Maybe you're getting bad advice. Maybe someone's infiltrated, whatever. Yeah. And, that's him sort of calming the language down, but maybe he should have used that language in the first place. I don't know.
Well, what the real reason that he should, what he should have done, in my opinion, with Dr. West, is to use the Socratic method, because it almost never fails if someone is actually a genuine actor. It just like, okay, so say if you do believe Trump is worse than Biden, policy-wise, can you give me some examples of one compared to the other? And then if they're wrong, you can be like, okay, well, what about this policy? Okay, what about this policy? Well, given all this information that we just discussed, do you still believe that, or have you changed on it? And let him reach his own conclusion. Because basically that's what was happening when we interviewed, is he called Biden a fascist and wasn't really apologetic about it either.
Yeah,
he talked about, literally mentioned COINTELPRO during our interview, and how and he openly said, like, we can't allow the justice system to be weaponized against any political opponent, regardless of whether in fact it was Trump. And he even goes on to obviously discuss how it's always been weaponized, not only against, like, people think it's just started against Trump, obviously. And I always talk to my conservative friends, I'm like, yeah, bro, welcome to the fucking club. Yeah. They always say, whenever we talk about how we get shitted on there, whenever we bring up January 6th, or whenever January 6th, is brought up, or what's happening with Cop City, they're like, oh yeah, now you know how it's Trump supporters in January 6th. But I'm like, bro, what the fuck? No. Now you know how we felt for literally the entirety of the creation of the justice system. Have you lost your fucking mind? Like, I need you to go read any book.
Right.
That's how you create bonds. That's how you create bonds, class bonds. And but part of what I think also happened was that one of the things that what Jimmy was trying to express, like in terms of Cornel West's discourse, it sounding like the liberal or woke part of the elite, it does make sense. And I feel like at some moment, Cornel West felt like it would be unprincipled for him to like readjust his discourse in different circles.
So no. I'm gonna push back on that. Unprincipled, or how will my peers who also speak like this view me if they see me with this interview with this white man who's very popular, and I decide to adjust my rhetoric based off of him, because that would mean I'm doing what? I'm violating the algorithm.
Well, in terms of organizing, though, the point that I'm getting at is that I feel like what Jimmy Dore was trying to tell him in I think a way that could have been done a whole lot better was something that's basic for organizers, which is you have to engage at the level where people are at. You have to understand what the common sense understanding of the world is. Find the rational kernels there that can be used to then take them to where you need them to go, which means that it's not unprincipled to adjust your rhetoric to where you are. It's necessary. If you're talking in the coast and if you're talking in the center of the country, you have to adjust yourself to the people that are there, to their common sense and their sensibilities. And on that basis, use whatever's rational there to where you need them to go. And in part, Jimmy had to do that too in his conversation with West. The
Mhm.
same thing he told him he had to do, he himself had to do. He had to
Mhm.
realize that how am I going to tell a former Harvard professor, Ivy League guy, that I want to coach him? What are the
Mhm.
undertones behind that? How do I approach this conversation versus how do I approach a conversation with RFK or Marianne Williamson or whoever else, right? So that's another point where I was listening to Cornel West and I was like, well, both are missing. Both are missing in it here. Like, yes, you have to adapt it. Jamie's right about that part, but he's himself not doing it. He
Mhm.
should have approached that interview a little bit different, and a lot of those clashes in form and not substance wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, exactly. And he's aware of that now. He, like he said, he's literally willing to talk to Dr. West to make amends, because he understands like now that his approach is wrong. But
I love that.
yeah, no, and I would love to see that from Dr. West, because if you are running a serious campaign, you can't do it without Jimmy Dore, bro. Like I hate to break it to you. I mean, if not saying you can't do it, but you cannot be a successful fundraising Galvin, like literally all those crowds you see at Jimmy's shows, they would be at your fucking like at any campaign rally you have.
I mean,
That is a
Jimmy
power.
Dore launched AOC's campaign.
Exactly, bro. Like, as crazy as it sounds, Jimmy is one of the most politically powerful influences in the nation.
Absolutely.
And it was completely on accident. It was literally on accident. He was the last person anyone was expecting to break out of TYT and blow the fuck up. But the reason he was able to do it is because, regardless of what, if you like it or not, he can speak working class.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, for the most part, consistent. It sounds different, it looks different, but it's relatable. And that's why, yeah, the fun, the comedy aspect of it, that is part of it. But the reality is it's just relatable. Jimmy is a working class white guy from the Midwest. That is kind of like the majority of the country. I know I hate to break it to people, but that's the majority of the country. Like, it is what it is. And to a degree, like, I understand what it's like
was trying to impress upon.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
No,
have
go
a problem with interrupting people anyway. I apologize. This is something Jimmy was trying to impress upon Dr. West and failing to do, that when you go to the Midwest, which is kind of what he represents, that's where me and Carlos are, right? I am typical working class Midwest guy right here, right? If you go there calling them all fascists and saying they're following a fascist, they are never going to listen to a word you say.
And kind of, and you know what? So you go to a Midwest, like, so I've been to like a Jill Stein rally in the Midwest, right? It's about it was 98% white.
Mm-hmm.
Not because, like, I've been to like New York, for example, where it's not that. It was like 50,
Right.
like a bunch of Hispanics, bunch of Arabs, but I can't remember where. Oh, it might have been a part of Michigan. And I'm like, go to a fucking predominantly white rally in Michigan and explain to a bunch of white people who are surrounded by white people that they're engaging in white supremacy. They're gonna be like, a supremacy of what? We're all white. I'm confused. Literally, I'm like, well, you don't see Trump, and they're gonna be like, well, I mean, what the fuck does that got to do with me putting food on the table? I'm confused. How is white supremacy the biggest problem? It has nothing to do with me.
Right.
Now, you can make an argument. Obviously, they can get, but literally, there's also like an undiscussed reality that, like, if you go to a place like Idaho, for example, when I tell you white supremacy isn't an issue, it's because you can't have it be an issue when there's only white people around. When I say it's not affected by it, doesn't affect them at all. And they have no power over any black person in the nearby vicinity for them to be able to even exercise white supremacy if they fucking wanted to. That is the majority of the people that should be campaigning to in the Midwest. And does that mean white supremacy doesn't exist? No, but it also could mean, like, Dr. West has to understand, there's the Deep South, obviously, and there's a specific type of racism that's a little bit more overt. But I've been part of those Ivy League circles. And what Dr. West is largely referring to, and kind of similar to Jimmy, is he is so jaded and aware and sensitive to white supremacy because he has suffered from it in a way that he doesn't like. He will talk about the Trump version of white supremacy, right? That's easier to talk about, though, because it is very explicit. It's easy to quantify. It's easy to qualify because Trump just says dumb shit, right? And it's easy to relate to for the average black person. But the kind of racism and white supremacy that Dr. West has suffered from, you will never hear about. That you get what I'm saying? He's been prevented from having a job opportunity. He's been told, hey, you're going to stop this. We need to educate you on this. You're not good enough to do this. Why do you talk like that? Why's your afro like that? You need to what that is. He felt a different type of white supremacy, but that's also that unfortunately, okay, this is his personal, like my personal assessment, totally speculative, but kind of from my personal experience as well, and from people I've seen around me. He also seeks the validation of Ivy League white supremacy. That's the only reason that you can, logically speaking, it's the only reason you can even fucking like conceptualize the idea of calling Anderson Cooper your brother, but Tucker Carlson's a white supremacist. The difference is that Vanderbilt group that all talks pretty and they all pretend like they like each other when they're around each other, but they're the first ones to call you the N-word when you walk away. But that's the world that you've found the most success in, because that was also the world that told you it was a meritocracy, right? And if you just do the right thing, then you will always continue to find success. And to some degree, he has found success, but finding success is not the same thing as being accepted. And as you move up in the ranks of the corporate world and through the managerial class as a black man or a black woman, you begin to realize fast, finding success is not the same as being accepted. And
especially now as the entire PMC is shrinking down and we're going through this process and we call it reproletarianization, right? Like the amount of well-paid sort of tenure jobs for academics or well-paid jobs in professional classes is like half of what it was only 10 years ago.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. And it's going to get worse. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's disappearing completely. I mean, especially with AI coming now. I have a paper coming out on this thing and class in America and the problem with the middle classes and the color line and all that stuff. But that's going way off on a tangent.
If I could, if I can impart any like advice, and I don't want that person think I'm being condescending, because I'm not. Like, yeah, he's older than me. Obviously, has a lot more lived experience. But I'm no spring chicken. I'm 30. I think I'm 34. I'm pretty sure I'm 34. I've been in the military. I've gone to a public Ivy League school. I've been part of these world-class debate organizations where those people now are part of not part of the managerial class. They're like the elites of the elite. One of the guys that I debated against what became the VP of McKinley like 3 years after he graduated. Like those are the type of people that I was around. And I've seen the way I had, bro, one time when I was in a debate tournament, I was on the phone with my brother after a debate. And I was like, we're not talking about anything crazy. Like, he just asked me when I'm going to be home to hop on the game. And one of the kids says, bro, how do you do that? I was like, do what? He's like, when you were talking on the phone, like you sounded completely different than when you're doing a debate. I was like, what are you talking about, bro? And then I literally didn't know what he was talking about. To another black person like who had grown up in an upper middle class black academic family. He's like, oh, he's talking about you code switching. I'm like, what the fuck is code switching? What is he talking about? And she explained it to me. I was like, really? She's like, they don't see that. Usually once you commit to basically she was like, once you commit to the bit, you commit all the way. And she's like, and you're like weird because you don't. And it wasn't normal, especially I can't say I sought that validation, but I will say that I wanted to be respected regardless of my race. I didn't want to be treated differently. I just wanted the respect that I rightfully earned. And I can see that could potentially have been a problem that Dr. Winston dealt with on a grander scale in his experiences. And if you're not aware of that, then you can fall victim to it. And now, because otherwise, how do you justify, once again, being one of the pillars of Bernie Sanders' campaign, and then being like, I'm going to vote for Biden, and I'm going to endorse Biden, right? How do you see the night? Like, bro, you were literally in the shit during the 94 crime bill. Mm-hmm. You witnessed it all come to fruition. And then you're like, yeah, but Trump's racist. Like, okay, but Biden. Well, brother Biden, nah, fuck that brother shit. He is not a brother of mine. Like, he's brother with some KKK Grand Dragon somewhere. He's not my brother.
Right. He very much is.
But no, literally, yeah.
Yeah.
But everyone around him that once again, I want to be careful with my word because I want to say seek approval, but the people that he wants respect from, they all see him as less racist. They see Trump as more racist, and therefore Dr. West's rhetoric sometimes reflects the perspective, like the majority of human beings around the world. It reflects the perspectives of everyone else who's influencing you more than your own perspective. Why? Because once again, the higher you get up in that managerial class, bro, you're part of the algorithm. You're part of you're part of the fucking algorithm. I can't even, it's not even offensive, bro. Like, I was part of the algorithm to some degree. I was part of the Bernie algorithm at one point. It didn't last that long, but I was part of it, right? People literally were mad, bro. You know, whenever I decided I wasn't going to endorse Bernie in 2020, because for various reasons, even though I still supported him for the most part, I didn't endorse him. You know, people were literally getting mad at me. They're like, but you're the one with the best communications policies. Like, I was basically known as the Black Bernie, bro, because when everybody was attacking Bernie for being racist and saying he had racist policies, and I'm like, well, policy-wise, no, he's not, because I can go through a long list of these policies and no one else could. At the time, no other Black person was being given the platform to do that, and nor did they really have the capability to do that, because I was an orator. That's what I did already. So people were attacking me, not necessarily, because I wasn't endorsing Bernie, but they were like, you had a role, and that's why we liked you, Black man, and you're not fulfilling it anymore, and therefore you're the enemy. You're doing it for somebody else now, which I wasn't actually at the time. When I decided not to endorse Bernie, I hadn't endorsed anybody, but it was the mere fact that I chose not to endorse Bernie. And I was not shy about saying why. And at the time, I didn't think it would be a problem. I'm like, I'm a journalist, first of all. At this point, like, I don't really trust that he won't endorse Biden, right? I need to see more fight out of him, and I need to be on a side where I can hold him accountable to these things. Like, I don't see what's wrong with that. I'm like talking to Nina all the time. Like, we're still good friends. Like, nobody else has a problem with this except for the people. I'm like, oh, because y'all are worried that I'm going to go to the other team, right? I'm leaving y'all algorithm to join another algorithm. But the reality is, eventually they realize, oh shit, he's not part of any algorithm, therefore he's a problem. It's like the Ice Cube effect, right? Whenever he got more hate, Ice Cube got more hate from saying, I'm not endorsing anyone without a Black agenda, than Lil Wayne got when he openly endorsed Trump.
That's true. At that point that you were making about wanting to be accepted by his peers and white supremacism in the form that it takes in the academy, it's not only like a subjective want, it's an objective necessity. If you're in that field, you can't get by in that field without it. And that's I grew up in South Florida, Miami. We have our certain street lingo. That was just the way that I spoke my whole life. And I had to get in some ways whitewashed in terms of how I spoke English when I was in the academy, because if not, you're not respected. It doesn't matter how good the ideas you're giving are, but if you're talking street, they're not going to respect you.
Oh yeah, because the Cubans out there, and obviously sometimes they know what kind of Latino you are based off of how you engage in professional positions.
That's what they told me when I went back after a couple years. That you go hang out with your old buds, and you're not using the same words. Your tone is different, and they're like, "What happened to you? You got whitewashed." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." But it was, you can't survive in that atmosphere unless you do that, and it takes different forms. It takes a form with like journal publishing, sort of ideas that you have to comply with. But Dr. West is in that atmosphere. He's always been a sort of dissident voice in that atmosphere. He, of course, didn't get tenure in Harvard because of that, but he's still considered, at least in my. Yeah,
but that's evident. Like, bro, if you were anybody else, if you were any other white dude, you would have been tenured. Yeah. And West said far worse than anything West has ever said, that have still remained tenured at any of these Ivy Leagues or public Ivy League schools. But it was like they were just reminding all the other Black up and coming Ivy League professors, even Dr. West can get kicked to the curb. So stay in line.
And he's the biggest philosopher.
Just real quick, Carlos. A really good friend of our institute, Dr. Anthony Montero. He's the Du Bois scholar, right? Longtime revolutionary. He stepped out of line, wasn't talking the way they wanted him to talk, wasn't teaching Du Bois the way they wanted him to teach. They got rid of him and replaced him with a cultural studies thing.
And the saddest part is
for his job.
The saddest part is that it was in an Africana department, and forgetting what the name of the school is. Noah, maybe you could help me there. But
I believe it was Temple, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
That sounds
and the smears that they use to fire him, this guy's not really a professor or a scholar. He's just a communist propagandist. Like those are racist smears coming from the black managerial class, and that.
Because the white man who's in charge of them told him, "Hey, I gotta get him up out of there," because he was teaching probably the Du Bois the revolutionary. He wasn't talking about Du Bois the reformist. And they don't. It's like when you talk about Martin. Like I tweeted out the other day. I said it's always crazy because they want to bring up Martin Luther King or quote black people when it's time to ignore racism or try to own a liberal. But there's never when it's never used to acknowledge actual racism. That like y'all don't ever want to talk about MLK the revolutionary. Y'all never want to bring up Fred Hampton. Y'all never want to bring up Malcolm X, unless it's to talk about, Martin Luther King was right about the wolves and sheep. Like, motherfucker, we know that already. Like, we know that. But that wasn't only talking about liberals either, because I've seen what y'all have done to the Ben Carsons of the world. And people always say, "Oh, Ben Carson's account clears Sumner's account." You know who the fuck told the truth about all those type of dudes? Colin Powell. Colin Powell came out and said that his party is primarily, almost everybody in that party is racist. And he's known it, but he's had to, because he was in the military, and anybody knows military, if you're an officer, it officially becomes politics, because you don't really get promoted by through time in, like you mostly get promoted through with not NCO, non-commissioned officer. So like non-commissioned officer, it gets political around E7. But with an officer, after second lieutenant, everything that comes next, you got to kiss somebody's ass and they have to sign off on it. Now, if you're a black man named Colin Powell and you're a young, promising, strapping young soldier, you're going to be a Democrat or a leftist, or you're going to be a Republican, because it's military, right? And so how do I get in the circles that get me promoted the fastest? Because obviously he has his family he's trying to take care of. He had this, I don't know, I call it the curse of, I call it this, it's not like a coin phrase, but I call it the curse of the generationally talented black man or black woman. Is now my mom, my dad, my nieces, my nephews, my kids, they're all looking at me. And so if I decide I'm going to step out of this role and say, fuck the system, and now I'm a failure, not because I actually am one in their eyes, but because everyone else around them, because of the standards that they've set for me, are telling them that. They said, if you're not working and you're not making money and you don't have this pretty title, then you're not a success. And therefore, you've let down a generation, even though you've had the talent to do otherwise. Van Jones deals with this, you could tell, every single fucking day. He has no idea what to do. And I almost feel bad for the dude. Seriously. I think Dr. West, he was very explicit. He deals with this to some degree as well. It's much easier for like a person like maybe Jimmy Dore or Kyle Kalinske. You know why you can kind of like, they can just, not Jimmy doesn't do that, but I'm just saying like why people like Anna and they can just move and sway. Why? Because what they do and how they talk, who they talk to, bro, their families don't give a fuck. Their families don't care. However their lives end up does not affect Anna Kasparian's mom and dad and cousins and whatever. My family, people get calls because of something they support me doing, and I don't hear about it till later. People call my brother, yo, I'm so proud of your brother. People talk to my mom, oh, I'm so proud of your son. Why? Because I'm one of the, like I said, the curse of being generationally talented, and all those expectations get heaped on me. And if you are not handling it in a healthy way, then you do whatever you can to satisfy those expectations. And a lot of the times that leads to you just conforming and assimilate. Because now it's just about the appearances. But I'm in a position, obviously, where like I'm a public figure and I can talk to a camera where I can curate. I'm like, no. If you're going to have expectations of me, this is what you need to expect. These are my standards that I set for myself. And if I break those standards, then you should be disappointed in me, regardless of what my bank account says, regardless of what my titles or my experience says. That's when you should be disappointed in me. I don't let society curate or determine how people who love me and support me define my success. Like I don't allow it to happen. But it's, I made that decision very young, and there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with that. But that's why I call it the curse. Because when I decided not to go to Harvard Law School, bro, people were on my ass. It took my mom till maybe I made that decision like 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago. My mom didn't get over it till like a year and a half ago. I'm dead ass, bro. My mom's pissed because I was a full ride, bro. I was going to get paid to go to school, to go to law school. Like it would, and she was like, "How could you be with degrees?" And I'm like, "Mom, but what does the degree say? Like, I'm smarter than anybody that I'm fucking talking to." Like, I was like, I'm like a president advising a presidential campaign and a congressional campaign at the same time. She's like, "What does that have to do with anything?" I'm like, because that's how they're like, well, what do you mean? What does that have to do with anything? Because they're literally telling me the foreign policy advisors they were originally for one of the campaigns, basically, they were like, yeah, those foreign policy advisors that I had fucking sucked. You're the only one who gets it. I don't know how you get it. And my mom was like, well, if you would have went to law school, imagine what you could do. I said, I don't know, Mom. If I was a presidential fucking candidate, start my own goddamn show, program, get on TV. What? You tell me what I could have did if I wouldn't got that law degree. Everything I'm doing right now, but without that or without being attached to some law firm trying to pay me whatever I can so I can just shut the fuck up and do what they tell me to do so I get addicted to that lifestyle so I can't break away. Yeah, like that's all it is. But I want to be able to tell my friends you got a degree. That's basically what it is. You got a degree.
It's institutional legitimacy that you get with that, and it's
yeah, exactly. Fuck them.
Where I'm from, we call it buying pieces of paper from the bank.
Yeah,
an expensive
from the bank. Yeah. Me and my wife together are a bit over 100K in debt.
Oh Jesus!
Starting.
I try not to never get in debt by more money than I've ever had in my bank account, and that is definitely.
It was impossible. I had a full scholarship. I never got even an A-. I was straight A's all throughout. I had a sports scholarship. I had everything, and I still ended up with over 60K in debt for myself, and the same thing for my wife. And it's just impossible. But it's this which is shaping our generation and allowing people to come to, the ideas that are in our part of the woods. But I wanted to ask you something new, some recent news that have came out regarding the West campaign that at least Jimmy has felt throws a little bit of light on the conversation that was had. Peter Dow has just came out to be the central manager behind the West campaign. I never knew much about him. Like I mentioned, when I was working with the Bernie campaign, I still don't have a Twitter. I used to institute one, but it's like he was it seems like he was someone who was very deeply entrenched in the neoliberal stupidity and attacks of people, and that maybe at some point in the 2020s might have had a change of heart. I heard Dore mention in the interview you did with him that he was actually an IDF trained soldier and killed Palestinian people. So I do think it's possible for people to have a change of heart, and I think a lot of people within the system, they see how fucked up it is, and then maybe they have a change of heart. And I also agree with Brianna Joy, who recently mentioned that it's fucking hard running a campaign, and if you got someone who knows else that could that's always a positive. So what's your take on this thing? I don't have a fully consolidated one.
Peter Dow's a shit lib. But what Peter Dow also So first of all, let me just say I do believe in redemption. Like that's just a part of my core. I've literally watched a guy from Alabama who literally was racist his entire life. After hanging out with my brother throughout basic training, he realized, oh shit, I'm not racist. My fucking family is crazy, and he cut off his entire family. Literally would not allow them to see his daughter for life because the dad refused to shake my brother's hand. So like, I know that people can be redeemed. Now on the other side of that fence. That don't mean you got to make him the goddamn campaign manager, bro. Like that's all. That's all. I'm like, there are levels to this, and at the very bare minimum, for whatever reason it may be, and I could go into those, he has shit political instincts, right? And he has not shown me that his political instincts from 2017, 2018, when he made the change of heart, up to this point, have improved. You know how I know? Because you don't fucking work for Marianne Williamson at all, if that's the case. Like, and people are like, well, what if, maybe he thought, I said, I believe you. I believe that he thought he was doing the right thing. And I ain't like Marianne Williamson can pay, like, and throw the bag at him. It's not like she was getting a shitload of fundraising. Like, if that was the case, he could have ended up on RFK's campaign because they are getting a shitload of money. But that's not the case for Marianne Williamson. He just genuinely believed in her. And that's the fucking problem. How do you keep getting emotionally manipulated? People don't realize, though, Peter, if I'm not mistaken, is actually Lebanese. So Peter is Lebanese, and if you know the history of Lebanon, the U.S. in the West did a lot of manipulation there, and Peter underwent a lot of trauma. Hezbollah was quote unquote attacking there, and part of the reason that he had joined the IDF is my understanding. Don't quote me on this, but it's my understanding. Part of the reason he was being trained by the IDF, it wasn't to go into Palestine. It was to defend against Hezbollah. But what a lot of people don't know is that the quote unquote people that were being labeled as Hezbollah back then were attacking Lebanon on behalf of the U.S. in order to destabilize the region and give the U.S. like, how it's the same old song. It's basically the Syria situation. Not funny story, but interesting story. I don't know if you know about Steve Kerr, the former basketball player, coach of the Golden State Warriors. People don't know his dad was killed in Lebanon while by random terrorists who knew exactly where he was going to be at while he was in the military. And it was in the middle of Steve Kerr's father actively speaking out against U.S. imperialism and in favor of Palestine. And the reason that story did not get more attention is because of what I just said. So Peter Dow was a victim to propaganda in the same way that the majority of us were. And like many people from that region, unfortunately, primarily white passing people from that region who end up in the U.S., they buy into this idea of the American dream, that democracy is real, that that evil and good and evil are binary concepts, that if someone is willing to work with you, they can't be racist. If someone is willing to help you, they can't be bad because they know my struggle. They wouldn't manipulate me like that. Why would they? So when you've come from that type of traumatic background and then you seem to be realizing what you believe is the American dream, and then you see the other, because Republicans, I'm sure, because he's like not shy about talking about being Lebanese, he knows yeah, I might be white passing, but I ain't one of them. So it's a different vibe, right? To them, you're still one of them Arabs over there, especially at the time he grew up. So at a certain point, my assumption is that it clicked oh shit, have I been tokenized this entire time? And a lot of people, bro, Peter Dow, it was just, he had the most public coming to Jesus moment, right? Nina Turner used to be part of the Democratic machine. Obviously, I don't agree with everything she says, but she's they rebuke her at this point because she's constantly criticizing them. Tulsi Gabbard was raised to be the next president of the United States and left the Democratic Party and left Congress because she was fucking tired of them. And she said, they're not getting anything done. They're doing it on purpose. They're not trying to help the environment. They're not trying to pass universal health care. They're not trying to end the wars. They're trying to actively engage in more work. And why? Because Tulsi was being tokenized for being Polynesian and being a woman. And when she realized it, she said, fuck that. And that was a recent thing. Once again, I appreciate the mea culpa, but I would say the difference between a Tulsi and a Peter is that it's political instinct. like Tulsi isn't perfect, but she never forgets who the enemy is, or rather, never forgets what she's fighting for. That's why
that's a really good point, brother.
And Peter, like, you can't, in my opinion, claim to have great political instincts when you go from Hillary Clinton, then you kind of sympathize with Bernie, then you go from that to Marianne Williamson, who nobody knows what the fuck she believes. You got to go on Twitter and check her timeline every 5 minutes to know what the fuck she believes in at that moment. And then from that, you're like, I'm going to go now manage Cornel West's campaign. And like, I'm like, bro, what, okay, why? Why did you join? Because he made up a story as to why he left Marianne Williamson's campaign that I know wasn't true. I know why he left the campaign. And people say he was fired. He wasn't fired. That wasn't it either. Why did you join the Cornel West campaign right now? If it's just say I'm a campaign manager and I like leftists, and just, it is what it is. I don't believe he's an infiltrator. I think that's giving him too much credit. I know, and I think it's honestly giving Cornel West too much credit. People keep calling him a DNC infiltrator. He does not have the capacity. You can tell he wears his goddamn heart on his sleeve. He does not have the capacity to be an infiltrator. It just you got to be cold-blooded. And you can see, because somebody is a lot more, when somebody's more measured with their words, then I start being like, okay, there's something wrong. There's something off. That is not like, so for example, Marianne Williamson is very, very measured with her words, right? She's not an infiltrator. She's just Marianne Williamson. That's a whole different conversation.
Well, she's measured though, because she has to ask the crystals which words to use each time. So,
better. That's, you know what, my friend, that's a better example. Crystal Ball is extremely measured with her words. Always careful to say the right thing at the right time to the right people in the right interview. She lets Kyle do all the ranting, and she just keeps watching the bank account rack up. And that, whenever I first saw them like coming up, I'm like, yeah, I agree with a lot of what she's saying. But some of the things that she was like, the people that they would have on, so they always had every Bernie surrogate on. And at the time, this is the largest campaign in the country. Of course you need Bernie people, right? Of course you need to get behind Bernie if you want to redeem yourself, because if people go back and look, they're going to see you MSNBC shit libbing. So now you got to hide behind the Bernie clout, which we saw how many people do in 2020, right? And then she would have Tulsi on, but it was bizarre in the way, because she had all the candidates on. But the difference was, it was always, are you a sadist? And there was actually one time where I was supposed to come on because I was actually a Tulsi surrogate. And at some point they kind of realized, why are we only having on Bernie surrogates and Biden surrogates and like Cuomo surrogates? Why? And Tulsi was on a lot. And I was scheduled to go on, and grapevine is Crystal got it canceled. Because, like, not for nothing, but I can communicate Tulsi's policies better than the candidates can communicate their own policies. Like, that's just because I'm a literally lifelong debater at this point. That's what I do. And I've worked on public policy before. So once they realized that, somebody was like, fuck no, and didn't allow it to happen. Which was, I'm like, that's weird. Why would anybody have a problem with that? Then I was like, because Crystal doesn't want me letting people know the truth about the problems with some of Bernie's universal health care plans, about how it still largely relies on health insurance companies, how it's still a part of the Social Security Act, and there are all the problems with social, like, because I do policy and I help write policy, and I knew the problem, and people was actually, because other people started, because it was actually in the middle of that healthcare situation. I'm like, hold on, has anybody else who's swearing to God that they know that Bernie has the best, Tulsi is just bullshit? I'm like, has anybody else worked in healthcare policy? Because I have. And I'm like, so I'm not about, I said, so whoever wants to have a conversation about this, let's talk about it. Crickets. Crickets. Well, and then it became ad hominem attack. So yeah, but the measured way that people like Crystal speak, that would lead me to believe that somebody's an infiltrator. Peter is just like rage against the machine, never really measured. That just shows me that naivete, that doesn't necessarily mean he's an infiltrator.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that measured way people have of speaking, they're trained to do that. That's what journalism school teaches people, to use the correct words to manipulate an emotional response that you're seeking. And that's how public speaking trains you. That's how all that stuff. So when someone isn't speaking from the heart and they're that calculated, it's very obvious. And so obviously, the Cornel West ain't doing that. He just talks. He's him. He says it all the time. He's a jazz man. That is him to a T, right?
Yeah, for better or for worse.
My thing with Dow, though, isn't that he's politically naive, which I get what you're saying. You totally convinced me on that. But what does he actually bring to Dr. West's campaign that he couldn't have had with a different manager? The way his political sort of actions in the past have gone is completely contrary to anything West would want to be doing.
So
with the smears and how all the stuff you were just saying they were throwing at you.
So literally, like, it's hard as fuck to run a campaign, dog. It's hard. It is, and like, bro, it's hard to run a city council campaign. And I've helped run a gubernatorial campaign. I was close for 2 presidential campaigns. A congressional, bro. It is like there is never a point where the campaign manager is less busy than the candidate.
Oh, believe me, I know. Actually, a good friend of mine lives right over that way. Ran Nina Turner's last campaign.
Yeah, so yeah,
he was exhausted 24/7.
Yeah, and that was a situation where you kind of could hear, like, Nina had already been in public office, so she kind of knew what to expect to some degree, right? Dr. West has never ran for Congress, let alone ran for president, let alone ran as a Green Party member, which has its own host of problems that I'm not going to get into right now. And actually, it's probably better. So, like, from a strategic standpoint, it's actually probably better that he didn't get somebody from the Green Party unless it was going to be Jill Stein. Like, by the way, as an aside, I think the way to save his campaign is to make Jill Stein his running mate. I think that is what would close a lot of holes. And part of the reason I think that Jill came out so fervently and let people know that she was the one who suggested Dow was so that because there's no one else politically that I trust 100% to at least not make a horrible decision than Jill Stein. Because 99% of the time she makes the right decision. And I know just from the tea, if you will, from the business that is spilt, because I've just been so involved for so long, that there are members of the Green Party who don't like Jill because Jill is a revolutionary, not a reformist. And she will not put up with any type of DNC, Democratic Party blackface that be going on in the Green Party. In other words, manipulation of rules, cheating of other candidates, using funds the wrong way, et cetera, et cetera. So if Jill is kind of like the middle man or middle woman between the two, I think that people start to say, you know what, let's give Dow a chance. Because I know that in 2016, when Jill got cheated, and she knew that voters were being cheated by either party, she literally took her time, her money, her efforts, and sued in multiple states. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, in Pennsylvania, she was the reason that they went to paper ballots because of the findings in her states. If I'm not mistaken, it was Pennsylvania. Like, she put her money where her mouth is. She did not let us be disenfranchised without a fight. She's been consistent. She obviously refused to endorse Biden or refused to endorse Hillary. Ideologically, she's just been consistent. And so it adds a little bit more legitimacy that can counterbalance the inexperience from Dr. West and maybe some of the divisive nature of the last couple of weeks and the suspiciousness that everybody has, rightfully so, of Peter Dow, right? I think Jill could be the counterbalance that could, of course, once again, save the movement. I'm sorry, Jill. I know everybody is proud. I feel like she's so aloof to how influential she is sometimes. Like, I really do. Like, it's so funny because she's so powerful as a human being. And she, you know what she's been doing? Like, she's been like doing like Doctors Without Borders or something like that. Like, she's been out here like saving the world in her free time. So she has no idea what's been going on Twitter lately, which is why she finally decided to jump in. I'm like, bro, chill. But if she comes in, like, now we're having a different conversation. Now she can come on at the same time with Dr. West and Jimmy, and they're have that conversation sounds and goes completely different
Mhm.
She can advise Dr. West, and that's somebody Dr. West inherently respects. I just know that for a fact. Like he inherently respects Dr. Stein and a lot of what she advises. So that I don't know a single person, even people who don't like the political process at all, even people who consider themselves conservative, I don't know a single person who does not respect Jill Stein or a person that questions her integrity. So I think that is what we need to see happen next. And hopefully we do see it happen. Maybe we need to see a push for that online.
Well, Nina Turner also said that she had some big news. I think some people were speculating that the big news might be that she could be running as the VP with Cornell.
Would not be surprised by that. They have a lot of the same message. And Nina is extremely popular, but I would suggest that she would be an advisor. This particular campaign wouldn't be, because like their message is so similar, it almost defeats the point. Does that make sense?
Right.
When Dr. West and the Jamal Baraka like set all those records for independent candidates for Green parties, because Jamal Baraka had this Black liberation message that he was able to couple with the classist message of Jill Stein. And that is, I mean, arguably how Jamal Baraka, who is literally just known for being like an activist, that's all he was prior to that VP. You could tell when he was talking, he was not a bullshitter. He's a straight shooter. Like that being attached, and Jill Stein kind of like him and Jill Stein feeding off of each other, like led to one of the most revolutionary campaigns in independent party history. So we need to try to see something like that happen again. And I think that Jill would be best for that. Not that Nina Turner is like a bad candidate per se, but I think that there is still a level of distrust with Nina for endorsing Biden, and then for trying to run the Democratic Party in the way that the Democrats wanted her, or excuse me, run the Democratic campaign in the way the Democrats wanted her to run, right? And I think that she would admit, like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like, she's not naive. She understands how, like, you there's consequences to your decisions, and you make these gambles and these calculations and all this game theory. You got to just be real about it. There is a role for her to play, I believe. I do support that, but it isn't as VP in this particular campaign. Now, if you would have told me that Nina and Jill were going to run, like, just separately, Dr. West decided whatever, like, prior to all this going down, I'm like, oh shit, that's a banger. They're winning. Well, not winning literally, but like they're going to do some damage. They would do some, especially with the whole Kamala comparison contrast. They would do some damage. But right now, I think the counterbalance that the movement needs is Jill Stein. Like, come save the day again is basically where I'm at with it. Sorry, Jill. I know you're busy. I know you're tired of dealing with this bullshit. Probably tired of being arrested. Like, I'm from the hood. I know for a fact that I think Jill's been arrested more times than I have, and that's probably hard to do.
we should have a contest someday, Jill Stein, you and me. We'll see who wins.
Facts. I do got to get out of here pretty soon, though. But you guys got any more questions for me?
Well, it's been such a tremendous pleasure talking with you, brother, and it's been a very insightful conversation. I think we're in extremely turbulent times, and who knows what's going to happen in 2024, and there's so many moving parts, so many different crises amplifying and creating what's objectively, I think, a quite revolutionary moment. And
Absolutely.
The split between the people and the elite is becoming more and more pronounced, and the people are looking for alternatives. And I think it's going to be up to us to figure out, get our shit together, hopefully recreate those bridges that the algorithms and everything else pushes us to destroy. And I saw the comments that you were putting out on Twitter after the debate, and it felt so good to see some maturity, right? And for these things, like, political maturity is usually a reflection of personal maturity. So it felt very good to see someone engaging in politics without what we call the purity fetish, being able to engage with people through difference and trying to reconcile things and find a common perspective. So we got to have you back on again. I feel like we could talk for hours on end, and it's been a tremendous pleasure, brother. Thank you for coming on.
I appreciate you guys having me on. And a lot of the times, and don't get me wrong, I want people to understand when I talk about that, like, I have a lot of friends, people that I agree with, that I retweet, that I like. we can all fall victim like to the algorithm, including me, when I'm not being self-aware, if I'm reacting emotionally to something. But in the future, when you're engaging with anybody for any reason, just ask yourself, like, am I doing this because of who's watching? Or am I doing this because they're saying this or doing this because of what I believe in? And like, what exactly, first of all, obviously ask like, what a goal am I having to, what am I trying to achieve? Once you know what you're fighting for, the target becomes clear, your adversaries become clear, and your allies become clear. And it is much, much, much more difficult for you to be manipulated by the team sports we see. Now, the best example I can give you just before we go, like January 6th, I call a lot of shit for it because I was like, well, one, first of all, I'm anti-government. So like, y'all never gonna get me to give a shit about this. So like, y'all got like, slaves built them buildings. If y'all want me to give a fuck about them getting broken into, I can give two fucks. But aside from that, when I started hearing that people were being held indefinitely without arraignment, I was speaking out against it. And people were like, you support Trump? You were supporting insurrectionists? And further, they're not insurrectionists. Stop giving them that much credit. So there's that.
We got the same thing, brother.
I said, how many times have y'all heard me come on my show and every other show and say, fuck the criminal justice system? It is always wrong. It is only used to uphold the power of the elite and never used for anything else. And if they got it right, it was on accident. That's what I've always said. So, well, but this is different. Why? It's only different for you because you're against Trump or you're against conservatives. But I am for equality. I am for equality within the justice system. Therefore, there's nothing inconsistent about what I'm saying. It's just that you're angry because now you're realizing you're not as ideologically consistent as you thought you were. And you're trying to blame me for it. But that's not what it's not the case. No, like, and there were actually leftists who had come together with some of the people who were like trying to free the January 6 people and using their attorneys pro bono. I was about to say pro gratis, Brazil, but like pro bono, and people didn't know what was happening. You know why? The algorithm did not want you to know that lifelong advocates who were constantly challenging the criminal justice system were trying to help those being held without arraignment merely for being in attendance whenever January 6th happened. Why? Because then you might once again figure out, oh shit, man, we're not treated differently because the elite favor one group over the other. We're being treated based off of what is most convenient for the elite at the time. Because I always tell white people who don't understand what implicit racial bias or whatever, like or racism or how the elites use race in order to divide class. I said, all right, one day there's not gonna be any black people in the room, and then it's you. It's only gonna be you and y'all. Somebody gotta go. Somebody has to be the scapegoat. Somebody gotta be the victim. The elites need victims. They need to create opposition. Otherwise, where are you gonna focus? So challenge the algorithm, people. Fuck that Matrix. No, go watch the Matrix. Love the Matrix. But all that shit Andrew Tate be talking, oh, the Matrix this, those people, I would guarantee that 99% of the people who talk about the Matrix on Twitter, they are literally, quote unquote, what they talk about in the actual Matrix movie, systems of control created by the Matrix to make you believe that it's real, to make you believe that you're challenging, to make you believe that you're achieving something by supporting them, to disallow you to challenge yourself and your perception of self and how that perception of self has influenced your perception of others. That is Andrew Tate's job, is to make men never hold themselves accountable, also make women believe that at the same time, they're never holding themselves accountable. But in most cases, both of it's true. Both of y'all don't hold yourselves accountable sometimes. And both of y'all need to self-reflect. And everybody needs to be more empathetic. And everybody needs to realize that your life, the person I'm talking to, your life didn't fucking start the moment that I started a conversation with you. And I need to remember that with every conversation I have. And yes, it is emotional. It is emotional labor that some of you might not want to put in, but it gets so much easier. And then you learn that the reason you have all this anxiety when you interact with people, the reason that you get anxious when you go to certain places and when you go to it's because you're exhausted from that fucking mask you put on. And you don't realize you're putting it on everywhere you go, whether it be political circles, social circles, business circles. Yeah, at work, sometimes you have to do it. But with your family, sometimes you even have to do it. But like, that is what's causing your anxiety and your exhaustion when you get to the room, like, oh, it's like, bro, what are you tripping about? You just said 5 words and you did, but it's all the things I wanted to say, but didn't say. It's the fact that this person said this and I knew it was wrong. And this person is only acting like this and I knew it. Because when I'm there, we're around different people, they act differently, but I can't say anything because I don't want everybody to know that I can see through their shit because then they'll start treating me accordingly. That is what makes you exhausted. But fuck the algorithm, bro. That's if you take anything away from this conversation, fuck the algorithm, do your own thing. Because if you do your own thing, eventually the algorithm will conform to you, which is how you get the Joe Rogans, how you get the Jimmy Dores, how you get the Tulsi Gabbards, the Glenn Greenwalds. That's the Max Blumenthals, the Niko Houses, the RBNs. You think that every algorithm starts with a 0. Well, not literally, but you get what I'm saying. Every code starts with a single character, just one. Before you become this random guy screaming shit on TYT, and now TYT has to mention your fucking name all goddamn day. Or Sam Zeder has to mention your name every single day just to get views. Every single algorithm, every single piece of code in software or reality starts with a single character. And it's up to you whether or not you want to type that character and create your own algorithm or follow the algorithms that have already been given to you via this AI that we call classism.
Fuck the algorithm is a fantastic slogan, by the way. We should, by the way, Niko and I started talking on Twitter. Believe it or not, that's something we should spread on Twitter.
Yeah. I'm all up on that.
That's good. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on, brother. It's been absolutely fantastic. I've loved every minute of it. We're gonna have to do this again sometime very soon.
For sure.
We'll be in touch for sure. Stick around. We're gonna do a little outro. Stick around after. We'll talk for a minute, hang out. To everybody else, I'm sorry we didn't.
No, I actually have to go. I have to do something in 3 minutes.
Oh,
okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll get together soon, man. Y'all got my Twitter account, and I'm on YouTube. You can just look up Niko House. I'm on Twitter, YouTube, Rockfin, TikTok, Instagram, and Telegram as well.
We'll link all of that to the video as well, so you can please go check out his channel. It's amazing. Especially the shorts too. It's not so often you get people who are really good at short and also the longer stuff.
I appreciate it.
Our little specialist Eddie, man, but there's a few. Nick is also getting very good from RBN.
Yeah,
at the short
Eddie does some great stuff, some really informational stuff. I appreciate his work. Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, thank you to all who watched. Thank you, Niko, for such an insightful conversation, and we'll sign out the same way we came in with the Glorious International. See you all.
Cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.